The other day I was perusing Netflix, although let's be honest, what I was actually doing is debating with myself if I should watch the Ocean's trilogy for the 15th time, but that's depression related. But then I saw something that had come out apparently that exact day, which is Tribes of Europa, and I saw the preview of it that you see on the website. And I thought to myself, wait, is that the guy from Dark? And then a few minutes later, I was finding out that also it was the creators of Dark as well. So what I did is I thought I really should lower my expectations of this, because even though Dark was very good, this is still a German production. So I started watching it, and after like 5 minutes, I got confirmation that I am indeed a very wise person. So here's the thing, right? Tribes of Europa is the worst kind of media to exist. It's not very good, but it's good enough, and it's certainly interesting enough to keep me hooked. Now here is a minor spoiler warning. I will try to keep it to world building spoilers and avoid story spoilers, except for one very specific bit from Keanu's storyline, which is not spelled the way you think that it is spelled, but I think it really needs to be talked about. Tribes of Europa is a show set in a post-apocalyptic Europe of the year 2074, and by Europe I mean like mostly southeastern Germany, but also some bits in other places. But you wouldn't know, because for some reason they all speak English with like Nordic and German accents, except when they're speaking, actual German. The premise of the show is that in 2029 there was a thing called the Black December, which was an apocalyptic event that essentially, had massive power outages, and then other things that are not, like, as clearly defined. I suppose this is one of the mysteries that they want to keep up their sleeve, how exactly that happened. And as a result, all of the societies in Europe have reverted to sort of like tribalism. And even though most of them aren't really tribes, they're still called tribes. And when I say tribes, what I mean is the English word tribes in a show that is primarily in German. And if you only speak English, you don't know the frustration of this, but there's a thing called Anglicisms, which is basically you use an English word instead of a word where you have a perfectly fine word in your native language that you could be using instead. Now, I have no problem with loanwords. This is how language changes and evolves. I am a huge offender when it comes to Anglicisms, mostly because very often the German words will simply not come to me. And yet, somehow, I find the pointless Anglicisms that they use in this show to be so infinitely grating, and they use them from the very beginning. I don't think the very first word of it is an Anglicism, but I wouldn't be surprising if it was. Now, to be fair, a possible world-building explanation for this is that, like, everybody does also speak English, because even though, like, Europe has been destroyed in terms of its infrastructure for the most part, and people have a very difficult time getting around in ways that was never really the case before, also, that isn't a problem anymore, and Europe is the most cosmopolitan place that you could possibly imagine, and also there's a huge amount of British people, even though it's like an isolated island on the different side of like a body of water. They're all over continental Europe. The show revolves around the personal storylines of three siblings, Keanu, Liv, and Elia, who look about as related as a permanent marker, a photocopying machine, and a novelty SpongeBob bowling ball. They are just done hunting wolf, because apparently the knowledge that toxins filter up the food chain and predator meat is not usually the healthiest or most nutritious of meats that you can get was lost in the apocalypse when a spaceship lands nearby, I should say crash lands, and they decide not to investigate. The reason for this is because they are Origines, which is a tribe that has forsworn all technology, which is very quickly explained by a guy with a cybernetic hand wielding a custom-made cattle branding gun. And here's the thing about Tribes of Europa, it's full of just these very interesting factions, like visually, culturally, aesthetically, even ideologically, they're very, very interesting. It's just that they make no fucking sense. You have the Crows, who are honorable but also evil imperial warriors warriors who practice hardcore slavery to create drugs that they sell to all the other empires they are also at the same time at war with. You have the Crimsons, who are in fact a military junta, but also they're very cosmopolitan and they are pro-EU ideals of good liberalism, and also they send their actual head of state into hostile territory for diplomatic negotiations with the foreign head of state they are at war with, because apparently they failed Geopolitics 101, or maybe that knowledge was also lost in the apocalypse. Look, the whole tribes thing is just so stupid. Is not only are they just pure ideology, they also often have these weird religious beliefs, like the Origines think they get reborn in their lake somehow. There's people still alive from before the apocalypse. They remember the world as it is today. One of them is a major character in the show. He drives a fucking fire truck. I'm not saying the tribes are cool. Again, I kinda think they're very interesting, but at the same time, they make literally no sense, and most of them are in every aspect completely antithetical to how any aspect of society works in modern Europe today. I think this could have been very easily fixed if they had just set the show in 2174 instead of 2074. There's no reason why that couldn't be the case. It's not relevant even that some of the characters were around during the apocalypse. They could have just done it and made this more realistic, and they chose not to. Same goes for the fucking weird-ass names. There's still people alive who are called Jacob and fucking Maurice. Why give your kids these fucking insane names? Is that what Black December actually was? Is like a brain virus that made everyone into LARPers and they stopped doing infrastructure because they were so focused on staying in character? That's actually a very cool idea. Now, let's be fair, these tribes, at least the big ones, they're not really like caricatures even. They are complex and even portrayed in a way that is nuanced, which I like. I just personally don't really understand why they need to be fucking cults. It's especially grating when the show, which invests a lot of time in establishing the cultural world building and the personal character building of the people that are in the show, just sort of suspend the things that are established because at that point in time it sort of suits the plot, which it does all the fucking time. Like when the selfish conman character suddenly becomes altruistic, or when the unforgiving warrior society suddenly gives a shit about prisoners of war. All of the relationships in the show develop way too fast, and just people immediately like each other that really just shouldn't. Which personally I think is the major problem with the show, and I think that may not even be the showrunner's fault. It has only 6 episodes, but it should have been at least 10 in my opinion to properly set up and explore the things that happen. It's too much plot happening in too short a period of time. I'm sorry, but I just don't see how Moses the ruthless scavenger and Elia, whose entire fucking tribe just got murdered, developed this really nice and adorable father-son relationship pretty much immediately, even though they stab each other in the back all of the time, and they trust each other whenever the plot demands it, even though they stab each other in the back all of the time. But the cringe of that is actually overshadowed by another relationship in the show, and if you have seen the show, you know what's coming. It makes me so incredibly uncomfortable. It's really, really bad, and ironically, it's the best developed relationship in the show. So there's this girl. She gets enslaved by a powerful Lord of the Crows who, he treats his slaves like they're basically cattle in a drug factory, and eventually, because she tattles, he chooses her as a personal house slave, of whom he has many. Now, these house slaves, they don't actually do any work. They're just a special class of slave that are just adornments. They're like sexual objects that get paraded around at social events. Oh, and also, this lord, what he does is he rapes them. The girl in the show specifically is raped by this lord several times with a knife at her throat. we actually see this happen, and it only is shown once, but it is implied that it happens multiple times, and the same is true about all the other women that he has as house slaves. This then develops in a sort of weird mentoring relationship where the Lord helps and grants the girl's wish to engage in trial by combat to, earn her freedom and become a crow and serve that lord as a crow. And they actually become rather close. And he raped her at knife point. That is something that happened in that show not 2 episodes earlier. Do you think that sounds so fucked up? No one could get away with showing it on television. You'd be correct. It's not actually true what I said. What really is the case is that the slave is a guy and the Crow Lord is a woman. And she rapes him at knife point and then becomes his mentor. Now, the show certainly does not portray this as being fine or acceptable in any way. The crows are generally cruel and rather evil. And I have to be honest, I thought it was a very interesting exploration of a very, very problematic character dynamic. I shouldn't say problematic, let's just say fucked up, because it is extremely fucked up. But it was also the personal storyline that I was the most invested in. But it is kind of weird to me that you can just, do that when the situation that is gender swap that I described earlier would have created an outcry so massive that the show would have been cancelled so hard that anyone involved with its production would have ceased to exist retroactively through time. Also, they used the Wilhelm scream twice, which is, I mean, come on. But it's certainly a big fucking yikes. Bigger yikes even than, are we glorifying the liberal military junta because it represents our multicultural ideas, which I'm not even sure that that's what they're really doing. Also, what the fuck is up with the Atlanteans? It requires tropage to make me believe in the existence of some kind of space-age technology enclave in this post-apocalyptic world, but apparently they were around before the apocalypse even? Oh, and if you are going to watch it, unless you speak German and English, I mean, you probably speak English if you watch my channel, and which, if this sounded interesting to you, any of this, you should. It could be at least an interesting watch for you to have. You will have to choose between the terrible subtitles and the horrendous dub. The subtitles rarely reflect what the characters are actually saying when it's like the English subtitles for things that are said in German. To the extent where you would probably get a little bit confused when you read, "It doesn't matter that your family's dead," and then the other guy goes, "Yeah, I suppose you're right," because what was actually said was, I know your family's dead and that's terrible, but you need to look forward and move on from this, at least for now, because we are in this special situation. And the dub, whole different problem, right? So, in the show, characters alternate between speaking German and English, but it appears, and I might be wrong about this, because maybe there's different studio setup, I'm rather sensitive to stuff like that. But I'm pretty sure that for most of the characters, the actors that are, the real flesh and blood actors and the voice actors that dub them are different people. So whenever they speak a different language, they have a different voice. Not sure how nobody noticed this problem, or that this was a problem, but here we are. One very positive thing I have to say about the show is that Moses is a really cool character. Even though he constantly contradicts the things that are established about him as a character, anytime he's on screen, he's very, very entertaining. The actor does a very good job. The guy from Dark, his lines are well written, even though, he as a character is not necessarily well written. He brings something to the show that really spices it up a little bit. So in the end, I don't not recommend Tribes of Europa. If you are a fan of the classic post-apocalypse tropes, you should maybe give it a go. It's only 6 episodes, not a big commitment that you're going into, but if you're not into that shit, don't watch it, it's really not worth it. Thank you very much for watching this video. Like, comment, subscribe, share this to your relevant communities, but do not spam them. Consider supporting me on Patreon or subscribe, start buying some of my merchandise or my short story collection, and in that spirit, shit, I have nothing to say. This is the first time that, because I don't script this part of the video, usually just something pops into my head. Well, just see you around, cunts, I guess.